It was standing room only in Carmel Mountain Ranch last night as residents continue to find a proposed development.
The land used to be the former Carmel Mountain Golf Course, and the plan is to build an estimated 1,200 homes there. News 8's Chris Groh is live in Carmel Mountain with more on this. And Chris, that area has 700 homes, and they're proposing 1,200 more. How are they going to do that?
Yeah, 1,200 units. It's supposed to be mixed of townhomes and apartments, and obviously this is not exactly the space that you might imagine, but with the housing crisis going on, land is rare to find, so they're trying to use what used to be this golf course. Now, take a look. This is an idea of some of the facts that New Urban West, the developer here in this case, is proposing to try to woo some of these residents here that live here. Now, they claim that 70% of the land that used to be this golf course will still be preserved. Now you wonder how 1,200 homes are going to go in there, and that's about 113 acres that they're going to set aside for bike trails, hiking trails, and other open space amenities like dog parks. Now, those 1,200 units that are proposed to be built, again, it will be a mix of townhomes and apartments for seniors, so it won't actually be about 1,200 buildings, but 1,200 units. There will also be other amenities and social spaces that you can see here in these renderings of what they believe that this will all look like. It's obviously a far cry from what it looks like now, and while they claim to be preserving a majority of the available land, and nearby residents claim that they do understand that something must be done about the housing crisis, many of them still rallied last night during the presentation to support keeping the space open and away from development.
The plan has been in place for 35 years, and when we bought homes here, we were afforded the protection of the community plan to preserve the open space, and now suddenly they're trying to build 4-story apartment buildings in our backyards.
Now, as far as what will happen next, New Urban West still has to get approval from the city, and what they'll do now is put this forward to the city planning department for both review and analysis before they can move forward. Eric, Heather, back to you.